Members of the jury, you have been chosen to deliberate as the jury in this case to try the issue presented by the indictment and the defendant's plea of not guilty. Your duty is to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty in accordance with the law and the evidence shown. Before you is the case of the state of Nebraska versus Jane Smith, who is charged with the crime of intellectual property theft, which is specifically related to film photography. The defendant is accused of unlawfully obtaining and distributing copyrighted film photographs belonging to another individual without permission. There are multiple elements of intellectual property theft that the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Jane Smith knowingly obtained, used, or endeavored to obtain or use the film photographs of another. She did so with the intent to benefit herself or someone else not entitled to the use of these photographs. The film photographs were copyrighted material with a valid registration. Jane Smith had no authorization or legal right to engage in the conduct described. The defendant's intent is a question for you to determine. You should consider the nature of the acts and the circumstances surrounding them. The testimony of a single witness, if believed, is sufficient to establish a fact. Generally, there is no legal requirement that any fact be proved by more than one witness. You should consider all the evidence in light of your own observations and experiences in life. In our system of justice, the jury is the judge of the credibility of the witnesses. You are free to believe, disbelieve, or partially believe any witness. In evaluating the credibility of any witness and the weight you give to the testimony of any witness, you may properly consider the demeanor of the witness while testifying, the frankness or lack of it, the intelligence of the witness, any interest the witness may have in the outcome of the case, the means and opportunity the witness had to know the facts about which the witness testified, the ability of the witness to remember the facts about which the witness testified, and the reasonableness of the testimony of the witness considered in the light of all the evidence in the case and in the light of your own experience and common sense. The law does not require the defendant to prove innocence or produce any evidence at all. That's their right. The state must prove the guilt of the defendant by evidence to the exclusion of and beyond a reasonable doubt. If the state fails to meet this burden, the jury must find the defendant not guilty. Evidence may be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is the testimony of one who asserts actual knowledge of a fact, such as an eyewitness. Circumstantial evidence is proof of a chain of facts and circumstances indicating the existence of a fact. The law makes no distinction between the weight you may give to either direct or circumstantial evidence. However, a conviction based on circumstantial evidence alone is not to be sustained unless the evidence is consistent with the hypothesis of guilt and inconsistent with any other reasonable hypothesis. It is not sufficient that the evidence creates a strong suspicion of guilt or even a probability of guilt. You should consider the possibility that although the evidence may be consistent with a hypothesis of guilt, it is also consistent with the hypothesis of innocence. As you proceed with your deliberations, it is essential to remember that each piece of evidence presented during the trial should be considered with great care. The evidence you have seen and heard includes the testimony of witnesses, the film photographs in question, and any other material submitted during the trial. In considering the evidence related to the film photographs, you should examine the nature of the copyright claim, the manner in which the defendant allegedly obtained the photographs, and the intent behind the distribution of these photographs. You must also consider the expert testimony provided by both the prosecution and the defense. Experts in the field of film photography and intellectual property law have offered their opinions based on their expertise. It is your role to determine the credibility and weight of these expert opinions in light of all the evidence presented. Furthermore, you should deliberate on the value of the film photographs, not just in monetary terms, but also in terms of artistic and cultural significance. The impact of the alleged theft on the original owner, the artistic community, and the public at large is a factor for your consideration. The defendant has the right to a fair trial, and this includes the right to be judged based on the evidence presented in court and nothing else. Your verdict must not be influenced by any outside information, discussions, or biases. You must not allow yourselves to be swayed by emotions or sympathy for or against the defendant or the alleged victim. The law requires that your verdict be unanimous. All members of the jury must agree on the decision of guilty or not guilty. If you find that the evidence does not establish the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must return a verdict of not guilty. Conversely, If you find that the evidence does establish the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must return a verdict of guilty.